Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
Hi, sis. Hey, sis.
Hey, sis.
Hey, sis. On today's episode of She Blaze, Amazon supports the MORE Act. Connecticut is under fire for its sharecropping equity model, and cannabis gets more attention on the U.S. House floor.
Well, I can't wait to jump into those. But first, of course, we got to kick things off with our high of the week. And my high of the week is new flower strains, y'all. This is my favorite part about being in a legalized market because I get to do my cannabis cocktails the way I like to do them. And so, yes, the new flower strains for me are Jack Herrera as well as Lemon OG. It looks like we're having some technical issues with our banners, but basically, Jack Herrera is my favorite because it's high in terpinolene. And terpinolene is a terpene that isn't very common in our cannabis strains that you see on the commercial market. That's not because it can't be, because it's mostly because of genetics, but it is very high focus. And but if you take too much Jack Herrera, for at least for me, it starts to make you feel very antsy. It's almost like I'm already A-type personality, so it's taking me over the top on the A-type personality. And then Lemon OG is a favorite strain as well, which is high Myrcene. And that's the strain that a lot of times, or the terpene that a lot of times people feel are, what makes it an indica. But in fact, it's the most common terpene across all of the strains that we see in our commercial markets. And it's more for anti-inflammation and being, more relaxed. The two of them together is like putting a very cold scoop of ice cream on warm cookie. It is a perfect combination. Of course, I mixed that with my Bubba Kush hemp flower, and now I've got the one-to-one with the CBD THC of a perfect group of, flower strains that really work well together to make me feel relaxed while productive.
Yes, well, I'm a sativa diva, so I always love having me some Jack Herrera on deck, and definitely enjoy your cocktails. I don't know if I do your ratio sometimes, but I like the idea of mixing different things together. So I always love how you could break it down. But my high of the week goes out to you. Shout out to you for getting featured in High Times. High Times definitely under activism too. So here you are being a part of really regulating the industry, but you're also still speaking out about what needs to happen in all of these other markets. And I think it ties well into our main topic. So I'm super excited. I want to give a shout out to you and drop that link in the comments so everyone can read about it and share about it. So exciting. I feel like you need a cover next time. So I'm just put that out into the universe.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, sis. This is actually my second time being featured in High Times. And, it's really interesting because a lot of people who are 50 and over reached out and was like, I remember when High Times used to be the thing that was covered like, porno magazines, but it was my favorite magazine. And, it's so dope to see you being featured. So High Times has come a long way, but it has been around for a while. And I definitely respect some of the transitions that they're attempting to make. But the jury's still out on them. I appreciate Andrew Ward for the shout out.
Yes, always. It feels good to get recognized and get your flowers. So I would love to get into the first hot topic. It's a lot of stuff going on in the cannabis industry, y'all. And it's working retrograde. So I'm all about the universe. So I'm really feeling it. But I love this topic because we talked about it in the past about Jay-Z getting into the industry. And so now we're starting to see some of the great things that's flourishing. So Josephine and Billie's is a BIPOC and woman-owned licensed cannabis consumption lounge and I believe retail as well.
Absolutely. I'm definitely excited about it. Shout out to Whitney, who is the CEO, Whitney Beatty. And yeah, we've definitely had some very interesting journeys in this space. She's actually the founder and I guess also CEO of the Apothecary case, which is a very intricate and sexy case to carry your cannabis in rather than keeping it in a shoebox, which a lot of us, I think, got trained to do if you were a 70s or 80s baby. So Whitney actually is also one of the first corporate to cannabis crossovers in the industry that I met, especially a woman of color, a Black woman, as she came from entertainment as an executive and decided to transition into the industry. So yeah, I am super excited for Whitney. And I'm also really happy to see the parent company, Jay-Z's company, start to activate their social equity investment fund. We've also seen a few announcements in the space about who's on the advisory group for that fund. And shout out to Mary Pryor, who is the industry, one of the people in the industry that's represented on that advisory group. And yeah, shouting out to, again, Whitney and team of fabulous, fantastic women that are bringing a very interesting concept. I can't wait to, we'll be in there. She Blaze will be in the spot. It sounds like a place to have a bud and bougie, right? We did talk about that too. We're already plotting on it, Whitney. We're already plotting on it.
Right. Just one time takeover, do a big old party. I love that. And it's already going to be fabulous. And the decor is probably going to be off the chain because you already know how we do. Okay.
And if you know Whitney, you already know how she do, because when sis shows up, she show out. Every time I've ever seen her show up and represent herself, first of all, she has fire glasses on regularly, so definitely check out the collection. But also just in general, her personality is one that clearly is very outspoken about where we need to go with equity. She's also on the board for Supernova. And, I think she picked a really solid team. And so we're just excited. So Jay-Z picked a solid team. One of the things I got to also shout out is that her post had me cracking up, if you owe like me, because she said, I got 99 problems, but an investor ain't one. Hashtag Jay-Z's at my cap table, y'all. So I'm really excited for her. We celebrated across the industry because those are the type of wins we need to see. And that's the type of building we need out of celebrity, Black and brown celebrities that enter the space.
Absolutely. So shout out to them. I'm super excited. And we need celebrities like this. Why? So they can help protect us against the other giants that's coming into the industry. So let's move on to hot topic number 2, because this is some real hot tea that dropped in the beginning of the week. Amazon, y'all, they are supporting the MORE Act. Okay. And after that, they were like, we'll just end pre-employment drug testing for marijuana as well.
Well, you can't support the MORE Act and not do that too. So, at first I think everybody, this news went international, of course, because Amazon is a multi-billion-dollar company. And so, of course, as much as I wanted to be excited, the businesswoman in me was like, hold up, y'all. There's about to be some multi-billion-dollar players in this space. And for Amazon to make this move to get behind the act, like that's actually paying for lobbying dollars. And we've talked about that on She Blaze. They should be, we need to put a little bit of it should be the side eye emoji, just a little bit. But what are the details? What did they release when they announced this? What did Bezos say? Why?
Well, they didn't necessarily say why, but it is the second largest private employer in the U.S. I did not know that until I saw that article. I was like, wow, Amazon has grown that much. So that was just news to me. But, this is really happening rapidly throughout their company. When they were notifying their new employees, just sent out a real memo that went all all the way from the top down. So I really thought that was interesting. And they're also based out of Washington. And so that is a legal state anyway. So I feel like they were already kind of tiptoeing around not doing pre-employment drug testing, but in other states that like Georgia or Alabama, especially because they have delivery drivers, they feel like with the Department of Transportation, they had to do it. But I believe for the more local state level, not interstate Department of Transportation, they're not doing the pre-employment drug testing.
Wow. But you know what? Shout out to Ramon Richardson, who just said exactly what I was thinking, that they're trying to take over cannabis delivery. I mean, let's be real, y'all. That is what we first all think about when you think about cannabis nowadays. It's like, how do you get it? And what is the way it's getting dispensed, if you will, or disseminated out? And I definitely think we have to remember, not only are they the second largest private employer in the country, so they're setting a precedent for so many other employers, but they also are the number one in the country for delivery of anything, right? Like anything you want. You want food, you're going to get it from Amazon. You want books, you're going to get it from Amazon. You're going to get electronics, you get it from Amazon. And that is what the biggest retailers have had to contend with and trying to fight against it. Target, for example, my alma mater, I'm seeing a lot of changes. For example, you can absolutely now get things like, I want it delivered today from the store, as opposed to going to the store. That's their answer to combating what Amazon is doing. So we just got to be mindful that these are really large companies. One of the things I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming event for New Jersey Cannabis Insider is people don't really understand the difference between $1 billion and $1 million. I found that because we're using the billion with a B so much that we kind of it like glosses over what that is. It's a whole extra 3 zeros at the end of $1 million. So for those people who might be challenged with math, what that means is 1,000 times $1 million. And so then when you think about it, sometimes when you still aren't clear, it's like 1,000 millionaires all together in one room. Now imagine if you are a $70 billion company like Target, you basically got 70,000 millionaires all in one room. And so there's a part of me that says, if you was going to a battle, would you go to the battle with the 70,000 or the 500? And I'm not talking about the Sparta 500. I'm talking about just the 500. This is what we're up against. So when we talk about multi-million-dollar businesses in the industry, Curaleaf just got to 1 billion in sales this year. That means they finally got to 1,000 million. They are contending against these 70,000 million or the hundreds of thousands of millions that Walmart and Target have. So it's like, we're not understanding just how much power we're allowed to come in. But yeah, I've been breaking that down for a while. That's why small business is still so important to support, because we're going to then protect the industry that's been developing, but from these really mammoth big, businesses. They are definitely Goliath here.
Right. They eat couple MSOs, but the real tea too, is that Amazon's East Coast headquarters is in Virginia. And now we know that Virginia just legalized, and they pushed 2 legalization bills through their thing. They was like, they're hurrying really quickly to set up their boards, set up their offices and stuff, put people in positions to start regulating. So yes, please know that Amazon is hunting, and I mean, it's in Washington, so we have no idea what else they have going on outside of Washington, but now they're making it really well known that they are supporting legalization through the MORE Act.
Well, we should watch them. You can thank them if we like the MORE Act, which I know we're going to talk about later, but we should definitely be watching it. When a mammoth is moving, you need to move and pay attention. Be on alert, because the wave that may happen, it may impact you in a way that you are not prepared for. You really dropped some tea, because I didn't know about their East Coast headquarters being in Virginia, because let's believe that Amazon in Washington is definitely, the employees there, the executives there are reaping the benefits of Washington being a legal market. Now it's a crashing legal market. We'll talk about that, and but they are still at a place already that they could be operating, learning, piloting, and doing things that are off. Got enough money that it's like technically is not an Amazon thing. We hire some consultants to do this work. And now on the East Coast, certainly they could have been also hiring some lobbyists to be a participant in those things too. And now you have an East Coast and West Coast setup that allows you to handle a really good amount of flow of services, not to mention all of their warehouses that are across the Midwest and Southwest from, the type of land that they own out there. This is something that we should watch. We shouldn't celebrate. We should prepare. And that is what I will say for folks who are interested.
They need to figure out how to unionize their workers first before we start celebrating them supporting cannabis and giving money to cannabis. I'm sorry. I'm all about living wages. If they're not paying their employees living wages in a industry that is federally regulated, what do you think they're going to happen if they start working into the cannabis? Y'all going to be getting paid with weed from Amazon. They're not even that cool, right? So y'all might. So all I'm saying is I'm not really a fan of Amazon, actually, and because of that. So I'm curious on how they would treat their employees in the cannabis industry.
This is true. Probably no different than the way they've treated their employees now. I've definitely heard the horror stories. I definitely interviewed there in the senior executive level, and people and friends, it's like they work their employees for real. And they're lucky they're in a state that they can get cannabis legally, actually. But yeah, I can imagine what it's like to be a driver for them in terms of the pressure of some of the schedules and also just not also feeling as if you are not dispensable, because that's part of the issue we're working with Amazon. It's like they hire pretty quickly and easily, and the turnover is what it is. So
yes, it's very high, and they have the second highest rate in employee warehouse accidents too. So all Amazon tea is being spilled this week when they said something about the MORE Act. I'm gonna just say that right now, you guys. But we got to get into Connecticut. So let's move on to our hot topic number 3, okay? Because Connecticut is doing something real serious, and we have to spend some real time breaking this down for you guys, because they're trying to pass this legislation in secret.
Yeah, and I love that you said they're moving backwards, because they are straight up doing the moonwalk right now on equity at this point. I'm very disappointed. Just being real, it's just like, oh gosh, it was a tough week. On the state level, it's been a tough week for equity. We have a lot of people who want to, be lawmakers and be elected into roles using equity as this, campaign pitch, as opposed to what you actually do. And right now, what's I think most egregious is that Connecticut has been sitting on a bill, SB 888, if you're wondering, for a minute. And we've been waiting on this so-called language that was going to be, blow us away with equity. And it's been clearly, being deliberated privately. It hasn't been released publicly. And right now, from what we've been seeing in the tea, doesn't look like it tastes good for anybody at all, to be perfectly honest. Definitely if you're interested in real cannabis equity. But I know you got it, because you are so thorough. So I'm definitely curious about what was popping in the streets. What were people talking about? Because I got my own things that I'm just appalled at what, is actually happening with the government here.
Word on the street is that there are some different words on the street that, new cultivators would have to consist of equity applicants to obtain a license, and they would have to pay a $3 million fee. And so they're saying in order for you to become equity applicant, you got to pay that fee to become an applicant. There's been reports saying that equity partnerships will have to put 500. Oh God, I don't even know. Sorry. Wait. So okay, they're saying that you have to get that $3 million. The actual MSOs get up to 49% of the equity if they help you put up for that $3 million fund, and you would have to be trained through the model of that.
Okay, I'm confused because one, I think part of it is there's too much detail that we're trying to deliver here. That is part of the reason why I want to just see the bill instead of it being reported on like hearsay, because that's the way we've been getting it, right? Amendments have not been dropped. The last time we saw SB 888, it was looking real sus in terms of equity. It didn't have a proper equity designation. It's still using race neutral language to describe the components. There were some updates that included things that I did like. For example, if you lived in an impact zone in terms of incarceration rates for 9 of your 18 years of childhood, then you would qualify. So that would mean somebody like myself could qualify, having grown up in East New York. It did also include some median related limits on the income, 300 times the poverty level. It was, I believe, the cap. So there was some movement to try to narrow that a bit. But what we're talking about here, and what you just mentioned, is what is really the sharecropper model. It's basically like you set up a system that makes it impossible for an equity applicant to actually be an applicant on their own, which is why they have to then pair themselves with some, want to get rich non-equity applicant who wants to use their altruism to move forward. This is sharecropping 101, basically, where it's like, you don't have enough to pay for this land outright. I'm gonna do you a favor. I'm gonna give you some land to work. I still own some of it, or sometimes all of it. You own a little bit of it, and you're able to feel like you're doing something. This is the challenge that we're having. And from just that information alone, again, we have not seen a bill. This needs to die a very quick death. And I'm appreciative of Representative Robin Porter, who is in the Connecticut legislature, who is saying, nah, we're not going to do that. Either we are going to legalize right, or we're not going to legalize at all. Meanwhile, it feels like there is a real push to force anything down the pathway of passage. And it is not in the best interest of equity. It's not in the best interest of even small businesses. And yet they're still trying to tell us and put out to media that somehow this is going to be amazing. I call bluff on it. I know Jason Ortiz is not having it. And we are absolutely asking everyone, if you're in the Connecticut market listening to us, to take notice and start reaching out to your legislators, because this bill cannot pass with those type of provisions in place.
Yes, and sorry, you guys, my screen also was freezing. Technology has not been my friend this week, but I will say that they also put in there's reports of what the taxes are going to be in the bill, which they're saying that the state's general sales tax would be 6.35%, and it would apply to cannabis, and there will be an additional excise tax that will double the amount if they want to add it, and that 80% of the revenue from the latter will be going to social equity fund, and 20% will be allocated for mental health and addiction services.
Okay, so that's sounding directionally where we want to go. My understanding is they're also trying to put together some sort of committee to oversee this and look at it. And those are all important aspects. But I think what maybe people aren't understanding is that incrementality in some of these actions, like, oh, we have a committee. But if the committee can't oversee something that is just, then the committee don't need to happen either. So what does that mean? If the committee is only overseeing equity applicants that must do a sharecropper model, then we need to do nothing. Right? We don't need the committee either. That is the way I see it. And again, I definitely am also really wanted to make sure it's clear that it's not just Connecticut that is moving backwards. Oregon is taking some steps back as well. Like I said, it was a tough week for me in state cannabis equity movement, simply because people want to get credit for the equity in name. But when it comes down to the money and what actually needs to happen in action, we are seeing people fall very short. Now we're at the end of session for most states, and I feel like people are doing the humna. What had happened was, and with the situation with Oregon and our House Bill 3112, we've seen that we need to make a shift because they don't want to figure out the money, right? They don't feel they can figure out the money. It is always I think a reason, but without economic equity, there still can be no equity. We talk all the time about the pillars of equity in the cannabis health equity movement. And honestly, that is one of the first pillars we bring up, because we all know without that agency, personal and collective, to drive our economic resources, we are not going to see the needle moved. That's all that was happening the last 40 years of democratic reform programs. And yet, when we look at the numbers, we are still 2 times the unemployment rate, and the average Black man still making 65 cents on the dollar as compared to the average white man. This is a problem, and we won't fix it without breaking some things, breaking some habits. And the incrementality is the problem I see. It's like, oh, we can take a little bit now, and then it's like, for the next 2 years, you have a bunch of people who I've been labeling fake progressive that are basically saying, well, we did that. We passed that. Oh my God, but the policy, how is it doing? Well, we don't got no money, and we don't got no oversight. We don't got no accountability. How do you think it's doing?
Right. It's not doing nothing. Well, I guess my question is, why would, why do these companies that create these or these lawmakers that create these sharecropping models, why do they put the prices so high? I mean, currently there are only 4 medical cannabis cultivators in Connecticut. I mean, are they trying to make money and make cannabis? Like, how is this working? Like, I know Connecticut is small, but 4 ain't enough.
4 is hardly enough, and it's basically all white owned. Of course, there's no diversity in the market, and there's even though I would say for a medical market, the flower, there's still a little bit more than what you're seeing in New York. So that's what's so funny. New York got 10, and this is the difference again of a no flower and a flower market. When you have flower market, it does make itself, no pun intended, breed the diversity, right? And the one mistake I think Connecticut did was that they decided that they was going to whitewash the flower strains in the name. So, I'm dropping Lemon OG, Jack Herrera. Jack Herrera has been around forever. And instead, when you're in the cannabis market in Connecticut, you got to do some number chart that matches up with the actual flower strain name on the streets. And it was confusing. But there's 4 people that control that, essentially 4 entities that control that. And I still think they're controlling much of the conversation. They want to give the perception of equity by saying, okay, if you work with one of these 4 to do a sharecropping model, not only are you giving the 4 more advantage, right? Because they get to gobble up more of the market that they already have started, but now you're tying these equity applicants to never being able to really own their own thing outright. And that to me is quintessential sharecropper. Those things were not set up for Black people to then say, this mine, I done bought this off of you. By the time they would pay it off with the work that needed to happen on the price that was not regulated, by the way, on that land, these people, especially the Black men, they mostly were dying off. And then a new contract would start with the family members that were trying to say, but my daddy worked this whole land all my life, all his life, we don't have anything to show for it. This is what Connecticut's bill is setting up to do. And so we've got to just understand again that they are looking to make money, but they're still looking to over-enforce and keep the market really small, in my opinion, by setting this $3 million, $2 million, anything $1 million is going to be whack out the gate. That means it's not equitable. You should be able to come in and get a license without all of that. I've started to see more of the breakdown of costs of all these other licensing separate from this equity partnership, because that's the other thing, that is what was released to us. We haven't gotten the bill. And so we're seeing this equity partnership, and everybody is like, well, what the hell does equity partnership mean? Because we wasn't partners when we went to jail. At the end of the day, it's just another opportunity to allow the people who already have plenty of opportunity to continue to control more of the market. And so we're not doing it. We're not moving backwards. I'd rather just stay where we are. So that means no past nothing. And
keep your 4. keep your 4. Right. Keep your 4. Well, that's insane. We definitely are going to keep highlighting things like that. And we want to see the bill. Release the bill. Period, Pooh. So we could really pull out some quotes. And so with that being said, there are a lot of bills that needs to be quote right now that are being reintroduced but not released. So what is happening? And we go into our main topic asking that, what is happening at the federal level? Well, they are passing more and more cannabis bills, y'all, on the House floor. They have nothing else to do but to watch us and put some new policies in place for us. Okay. And with that being said, we're going to start off with the MORE Act. It was reintroduced last week and it has been heating up these streets, sis.
Yes. And one thing I want to just also clarify, this isn't bills that have passed, right? These are bills, some of them, one, safe, but these are bills that are being introduced. And what that means is while the states are taking backward movement, because we talked about Connecticut, we talked about Oregon, but we didn't talk about Texas, right? We didn't talk about some of these other states that have had some potential. Last 2 weeks, we've been talking about the crazy stuff happening in Mississippi. So we are seeing a backlash to our equity movement. So as big as New York is, and as important as New York and New Jersey are, we still are seeing other states take that regression. But now on the federal level, it's been a mixed bag. And it's a mixed bag that I'm be honest, like that's why we're doing the Roundup, because we want to make sure that you are not confused about what's really good. So you're right. MORE Act was reintroduced, but is it different? And remember last season, I wasn't supporting the MORE Act, right? So I'm curious.
Oh, yes. I forgot, actually, you guys. So we talked about it when it did pass. It did pass the House, right? Yes, and so you were unimpressed. For real. Oh, wow. Throwback, but is it? We don't know. They haven't released the text. Again, these are one of these things that are happening in secret. There are a lot of bills that's happening behind closed doors. Amazon just announced things. Who knows what's happening really? So I would say that what we do know is that the MORE Act will remove cannabis from the Controlled Substance Act and strike the core of its harmful status at the federal level. They will end the criminalization of cannabis at the federal level going on. So that means if you are driving in between states and you get pulled over in the wrong state, you might be protected to a certain level. Mm-hmm. And then they want cannabis arrests and charges, convictions to be automatically expunged at no cost of the individual. So we'll see what that translates to in law terms. And they would say that they would impose a 5% tax on retail sale of cannabis, and it would go into an opportunity trust fund.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, these are some of the same things that were included. Again, this legislation was passed last year. And by last year, we're not talking about all the way last year. We're talking about like December. So it is 6 months ago. And so to see it reintroduced, it was anticipated. So we've been talking about it for a while at the federal level. As you know, part of my role as a regulator, I spent a lot of time talking with representatives as well as senators. And this is also juxtaposed to this big Senate bill that has been long awaited, that is Wyden, Schumer, and Booker worked on. And they say they're going to blow us away, girl, with equity, like blown away with equity, apparently, with that one. And so then everyone's wondering, well, are you doing that in conjunction with the work that's been done with the MORE Act? Is that the starting place? Are you bringing it further? Because as you know, both of the bills that passed in the House and the Senate, in order for it to get to the point where the president has to sign the bill, they must be the same. And so when we start out already where they're not looking like they can align, we know we don't have a path to legalization. But again, MORE Act is now in its third iteration. Senator Booker actually is one of the forefathers of the MORE Act with that Marijuana Justice Act that he released in 2017 or introduced. And so I believe we will see some of that connectivity. But again, we haven't seen a bill out of Schumer, Wyden, and Booker's effort yet. And so we haven't seen a Senate bill. And this bill looks the same, except there are a little bit of tweaks, right? There are a little bit of tweaks. It was introduced by Representative Gerald Nadler out of New York. And so because New York's bill was so equity centered, you can see we're starting to see a trifecta of importance on how federal bills could be shaped, because Schumer is also the New York senator. And so it makes
Right.
me a little bit less concerned, just a smidge. But because at the end of the day, we know what people do when they do and what they do in the realm of politics. So
they performing.
they're performing. And so what we would say is we have a good trifecta to make this act be something that we can be proud of. Now, will the Republicans support it? I don't know.
Probably
and
not.
The reason we don't know is because anything that requires putting money in the hands of Black and brown folks, the Republicans typically do oppose it. In this case, there's that Opportunity Trust Fund. You see how everybody's branding the fund now. Mm-hmm.
Not all Republicans either. There's some Democrats that don't like that too.
Oh,
Joe Manchin.
And that's actually very interesting that you would say, because some of those Democrats have existed in the New York market. Okay, so at the end of the day, when it comes down to the money, that's always a sticking point. And so to see that the tax would go into an Opportunity Trust Fund, that's something that I'm excited about, because again, if you're not putting money where your mouth is with some of this policy, one, it doesn't get implemented well, and two, there's no sustainability. So you have no desire to really be accountable to a return on equity investment. And that's constantly what we're trying to talk to. But here are some of the concerns. The multi-layered licensing system. Why is it, if I am a craft licensed business in the state of Oregon, and I know I really don't want to do more than the state of Oregon, or maybe at most I might do Washington and California, I'm now going cross country to New York. Why do I need a federal license? Why is there another step for me? Why is that required? Is that required? And so these are the questions we have with the MORE Act, because the MORE Act also of 2020 included a required federal license for everybody. It also was the reason that, for me, it deaded it. It inadvertently included language from a tobacco statute. That's why we can't, plug and play here. We need to create. But from a tobacco statute, it inadvertently included the fact that you couldn't be licensed, or grounds for not being licensed could be connected to a prior conviction related to cannabis. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. That's the opposite of what we're doing in cannabis equity right now. And in fact, would jeopardize programs that have already been rolled out in Illinois, in Massachusetts, in California, now in Portland, that includes some of that identification of individuals who have been most harmed, meaning you have been arrested and or incarcerated, because it starts with that individual. And so what we found is that people didn't read the bill in detail. That is the reason why we, again, are breaking up this thing. We're bringing it in a roundup, because your legislators, 90% of the time, are not reading these bills in detail. And they're reading the headlines. And the headlines sound good. It's branded to sound good. But the details are really effing us up.
How they gonna read the bill in detail? It'd be like 400 pages. Okay, like, come on now. They barely paying their people. You already know. So, and not to mention, a lot of times these things have to get passed in a real way. I just don't. I don't know. I definitely think the MORE Act will get passed, though. I know we don't have to read the bill to know that. They are definitely going to pass this. If they passed it last year, I definitely think they're going to pass it this year. And I mean, they've been passing a lot of things that's been coming on the floor. So they're working. I don't know.
They are attempting in the House. They are. But again, whether it will pass full legalization, just reminding our listeners and viewers that you do have some steps. You need the Senate. We ain't got no bill yet. They ain't introduced nothing yet. People have been saying June or July, so we'll keep you posted on that, of course. But to your point, that brings me to some of the other bills, ICE, that have been already introduced. And, I don't know, man. Some of this I feel like is just confusing the landscape altogether. What is your thought?
Well, it's definitely confusing for me. This one in particular, when you brought it to my attention, I was like, wait. So we just giving ourselves stuff to do. So yes. Just working hard for no reason, child. So the Hemp Access and Consumer Safety Act, which basically hemp-derived CBD products will be fully lawful to be given in dietary supplements, foods, and beverages under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And this would be regulated by the FDA, to be able to allow people to ingest CBD legally, because legally, if you are having an edible CBD, it might be not that legal in your state.
Yeah, and guess what? Guess what? One of the number one ways to take CBD is in a gummy, and that is an edible. Even to be honest, a capsule is technically edible. If you swallow it and it gets digested, it is edible. And so, yeah, we are breaking all types of little provisions, but that's how you know, like, FDA is really BSing right now. So again, you talked about my guns, I got them, and they are blazing here because of course I come from the consumer packaged good world, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, it is important for us to recognize that the FDA has been fumbling this for about 3 years since we did pass the 2018 Farm Act, right?
Right.
And they have guidance, but they only are picking and choosing who they deal with in that guidance. And you're seeing at a state level, randomly states do things like the New York Department of Health decided, nah, we're not going to have CBD in the edibles, right? Although you could still buy a gummy in a smoke shop or a gas station or even a CVS at this point.
Well, I guess my question is, so they are passing a bill that the FDA could just regulate itself and do it?
So yeah, that's the problem I have. The agency itself could absolutely have already provided guidelines, but they're tiptoeing through it. They don't know what they're doing. So let's be real. We kind of should be glad that they're not like the USDA, who's, they just messing stuff up. Their interim final rules, even the fact that they call it interim final, I'm like, what? That is not something that it means that not so final, right? Rules, and you got people running left and right, and they are looking like chicken without heads because the USDA is creating a swirl. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand enough of the science. And we know that because when you meet with them, it is clear they don't have the understanding of cannabis science. Now, that being said, they've created all of these different rules that a lot of the cultivation side of things and the processing side of things are starting to make people worry and do crazy things, make investments in ways that ultimately we don't know if that's how it's going to be rolled out. On the FDA side, FDA is probably, I would say the USDA is like, special best friend, I will say, because again, a lot of the things that start with the USDA end up with the FDA, especially in the food world and the drug world, if you're growing it into a product ingredient like cannabis. FDA's been putting out information that doesn't make sense, but they at least have been vaguer. And the vaguer that it is, the grayer that it is, the freer it is for the operator to move and the market to actually grow. And so what we realize now that China's looking at CBD, right? China is like, they are real anti-weed, anti-cannabis, but they're the growers. They are the highest grower of hemp in the world. They're looking at how to capitalize on the CBD market. Now the United States, and this was introduced by Biden. Yes, I know. This is introduced by Biden. Now the United States is focused on how do we fix what's now a super gray market where people are claiming that they have all types of things that have CBD. I mean, honestly, I don't want to put anybody on blast, but I will, because like Sephora, for example, you saying you have a CBD corner, but it's all hemp seed. You don't got CBD in that product.
And you're paying the premium.
Exactly. And I do feel like that's what this bill would fix, right? It will fix that. But the FDA, to your point, could have already done that. They could say, hey, this bill, passed hemp to make it legal. One of the byproducts of hemp is absolutely CBD. But here's the real tea, and this is one of the things I'll just take away. That bill wasn't passed so that we could have better CBD. That's a byproduct. That bill was passed so that we could improve our industrial and materials that we're growing. We're looking to figure that aspect. But what has actually grown has been all of the cannabinoid-based products.
Right. Well, listen, they got enough stuff to worry about. You think they're going to agree on what needs to be grown for our infrastructure? I mean, you got to actually pass an infrastructure bill through all of Congress to get it signed. So I don't know. I am curious. I still feel like they could get it passed and regulate it real ghetto too. So I
we
don't
know
know. So it's like, just because you pass it doesn't mean it's not ghetto. And again, these are bills that have only been introduced. They're not visible to the public, you guys. But they do kind of give us some ghetto regulations. Now I know they be trying to talk about us, but no, America, it'd be like, what you doing, sis? And so, and this is on the House floor. We don't know what it would look like if it was on the Senate floor. And I hope with this new administration, they could at least put in people in the FDA that would regulate it in the right way, understand the science. So this bill doesn't have to go further past, doesn't have to go further past the administration.
Well, one, I just want to correct two things and flip it. This is actually a Senate bill that was introduced by Senator Wyden. Okay. He's in Oregon. And this is also why I know, because he's in Oregon. But that's also one of the things to talk about, is seeing the difference between the two arms, or the two branches, or the two parts of the legislative branch, I should say, how the House has been focused on certain aspects and what they're driving, whether it's the Safe Banking Act or the MORE Act, and what the Senate has been trying to do as well. In this case, I think the Senate is seeing that this is chaos. FDA didn't do their job. And so the Senate or the legislature can compel their agencies to do the job. But to your point, when you compel people to do a job without the details in it, then that means they could fill in the details with whatever they want. And it could be further nonsense. So we'll be continuing to watch whether or not there is, an interest in continuing to move that bill forward. But I think for the people who are in the CBD market, this can only help you be less in the gray, and more into a clear market, and you can actually deliver a better strategy that way. It doesn't mean, though, that it will be what you want, because to your point, FDA could take it out the gray and make it all types of gray.
Right. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you for that breakdown. And then there's also another bill that's been introduced as well.
Yeah, so I just talked about this, the Safe Banking Act of 2021. And again, when we see of 2021, I mean, yes, we talk about the years in every act when they name them, but this is like the third iteration we done seen of the Safe Banking Act. And I get asked all the time, do we think it has a chance to pass? We know what the money issues have been with the cannabis space. This is really a result of the fact that it's a Schedule 1. And because of the, 280E tax implications, because of its schedule, there are so many different banking institutions that cannot participate in the cannabis industry. But it also is the little bitty gate that we have on those, what I was talking about earlier, 70,000 million companies, right? Like a Target from entering, or Amazon from entering. So it's important, I think, for us to recognize that this Safe Banking Act is definitely there to help us and help small businesses, but it also makes it a lot easier for really big companies to say, all right, we're going to take this chance and look at the cannabis space. And maybe they won't jump all the way in, but they'll allocate a couple $1 million to a small team. This is the type of work that I used to do for these big companies. They go out there because you like to be a pioneer, so you have a little budget. You go figure out what the feasibility is. You create an analysis and a white paper, and it's basically outlining how you dominate in usually less than 3 years. That's the goal. They want to see return on investment.
All right, so we got about 3 years, you guys, before all these bills are heading to the president's desk. Okay, got it. Cool. Glad we ended on that note.
I mean, I'm just being honest about what we got going on, but because people ask me, okay, Dasheeda, do you want the Safe Banking Act to pass?
No.
Do you think it has a chance? And I say, are we really about to free the money access to this industry without freeing the people who are still incarcerated because of this industry? No, we not. And Senator Schumer done said as much. So basically, we already know that even though it can pass and will pass and has passed the House, it actually has passed passed already, and it was passed on the second time, it has really a very little chance of getting past the Senate. Not without their bill passing first. If we're not getting people out of jail, then we're not going to give more access to the money. And if that is a game that is being played for political purposes, shame on them. But I do believe that as well. That's my philosophy. So on just that principle, I support what the Safe Banking Act could do, but I think we can get just as much done by simply just legalizing the right way. But this is that point where people are like incrementality. And I'm like, but incremental for who?
I know the MORE Act better not have no equity language like Connecticut, because then that thing ain't passing either.
No, but on a federal level, that's the worry, because again, if they could pass the bill last year and it says that people who have cannabis conviction can't participate, and that's the opposite of what we're doing, then that means that we don't have enough legislators really paying attention and really reading things. Ultimately, though, Ice, this is why I started, and I'm excited to be a part of such a great group of dynamic women leaders in the industry. But the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, we are not here for it. That's all I'm saying.
No, we not. No, we not. We not here for none of these. You came out blazing and you got them for sure, because ain't no way these bills is happening. So you guys, we got 3 years to really create some good language and policy. And with that being said, thank you so much for always breaking it down for us and giving us the real behind all the fancy language.
You are so funny, but you know what? Somebody's got to do it, because I do feel like that is probably the number one thing I dislike about working within the government, is reading things where I feel like I understand things pretty quickly, and I'm like, wait, what? What did that just say? Let me read that again. And it's also, way the policies have been written, that they're always up for interpretation. And certainly it's never equity-centered interpretation. We are just now starting to change the momentum on that. And I think it's important for us to be a little bit more all or nothing. I do agree that there are things that certainly move us a little bit forward, but you know what? In some cases, if you think about it in a football context, if you are trying to just advance the ball and you're not close to the touchdown, then you can take these little incrementalities to keep advancing the ball. But we are there, and we have a really strong line with our momentum from what has happened over the last year. Things that we were fighting for decades and multiple years have started to see that change, but we need to hold people accountable. It's not just about saying equity, it's about doing what is equitable and ensuring that we can actually see what social equity looks like in our country. I'll just end with one last note, which is really around this thought that was brought to my attention by just an anthropologist that I think most people probably wouldn't know. So I'm not going to necessarily say her name, but she really busted down to say that we don't know what social equity looks like because we've never seen it in the United States. If we believe social equity to be the fairness and impartial regulations, policy, and law for access to our government resources, for Black and brown folks, we definitely haven't seen it. But it's not just Black and brown folks, it's women, it's LGBTQ, it's all of anybody disabled. If you've been othered in this country, you do not know what social equity looks like because it has not been set up for us yet. So we got to keep fighting because we're going to make mistakes out the gate because we've never seen it. But we do know what it feels like too. And so far, what it feels like is that people want to talk about it, but they don't want to be about it. And so we're not with that either.
I know that's right. We're going to call you out every single time. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and feel free to follow us on Instagram at she_blaze, and you could binge us anytime on Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcasts. And make sure you can follow me too at Cannabis Socialite on IG.
Yes. And of course, I'm Dasheeda Dawson on IG and Twitter. And check us out at theweedhead.com at any time. And great episode, Ice. Thank you so much for bringing all of the receipts as always. I look forward to next week's episode. Of course, there's so much tea. It's tea happening right now. So let me get back to work, y'all.
Okay, bye.
Have a great week, Ice.
Bye. You too. Bye.